While Tesla spends billions expanding supercharger networks and BYD dominates markets with low-cost batteries, a quiet Japanese automaker has stepped into the spotlight and completely shifted the conversation. The surprising part? Almost nobody noticed it happening. Not analysts, not investors, and not even the journalists who follow the auto industry every day. Everyone was focused in the wrong direction. Today, nearly every major car company has made the same decision: go fully electric or risk becoming irrelevant. Governments around the world are pushing bans on gasoline cars. Investors are pouring money into battery technology. Charging stations are appearing everywhere. The entire industry moved toward one future and assumed there was no alternative. But Mazda looked at that trend, stayed calm, and chose a different path. Instead of following the crowd, they revived an engine technology the industry had written off decades ago. Then they combined it with modern engineering so advanced that it doesn't just compete with electric vehicles. It addresses one of the biggest problems EVs still struggle with after years of development. It's the issue many companies in Silicon Valley and Shenzhen avoid discussing openly because admitting it could challenge the foundation of the EV revolution itself. If you enjoy stories about real engineering breakthroughs and overlooked innovation, subscribe to Street Horsepower. This channel focuses on the companies and technologies quietly shaping the future while everyone else is distracted by the loudest headlines. To understand why Mazda's move matters so much, you first need to understand the company itself. Mazda has never been the kind of brand that chases attention. They don't host massive launch events filled with celebrities and flashy presentations. They don't have billionaire executives making dramatic social media posts to influence markets. And they don't make endless promises about futuristic technology that always seems years away. The company began in Hiroshima, Japan, in 1920, originally producing machinery and industrial tools. Their first vehicle arrived in 1931, a small three-wheeled truck known as the Mazda Go. On the surface, it seemed ordinary, but underneath, Mazda always approached engineering differently. The company carried a quiet determination that revealed itself through the details of the vehicles they built. Then came World War II. Hiroshima was devastated in a way few cities in history have experienced. Many businesses disappeared forever. Entire industries collapsed overnight. But Mazda did something remarkable. They rebuilt with determination and purpose, and when they returned, they didn't choose the safe route. In the 1960s, Mazda shocked the automotive world by licensing rotary engine technology at a time when most manufacturers considered it too risky, too unreliable, and too impractical for mass production. Critics warned it would fail. They predicted maintenance nightmares and terrible fuel economy. Mazda ignored the doubts and made it work. When the Mazda Cosmo Sport launched in 1967, the industry was forced to pay attention. The car wasn't just another product. It was a declaration that Mazda refused to be limited by conventional thinking. That mindset became part of the company's identity, solving problems differently. Fast forward to today, and Mazda operates in more than 120 countries. In 2023 alone, the company sold around 1.2 million vehicles worldwide. Models like the CX-5 and CX-60 became especially successful in North America, where Mazda built a reputation for offering something unique, affordable luxury. They sit in a space between mainstream and premium brands, giving customers more quality and refinement than they expect for the price. Their interiors feel upscale, with impressive materials and attention to detail. Their vehicles are engineered with a driving experience many larger brands no longer prioritize. And perhaps most importantly, Mazda has built strong customer loyalty. People who buy Mazda often return to the brand again and again. That kind of trust is more valuable than any advertising campaign. But this is where the story becomes truly fascinating. While other automakers rush to unveil electric vehicle strategies, announce solid-state battery projects, and promise fully electric lineups by 2030, Mazda was quietly working on something very different behind closed doors. They were bringing back the rotary engine, not as a nostalgic tribute, not as a collector's item for enthusiasts, but as the core of an entirely new approach to powering vehicles, an approach almost no one else in the industry seriously pursued. A solution designed to eliminate one of the biggest weaknesses of electric cars and turn it into something people no longer need to worry about. The rotary engine works completely differently from traditional engines. In a normal engine, pistons move up and down thousands of times every minute, creating constant friction and mechanical stress. A rotary engine, however, uses a triangular rotor spinning smoothly inside an oval-shaped chamber. There are no pistons pumping up and down, no valves snapping open and shut, and no complicated crankshaft converting motion back and forth. Everything rotates in one smooth, continuous movement. Watching it operate almost feels elegant because of how mechanically simple it is. That design gives the rotary engine a huge advantage: size and weight. A rotary engine capable of producing the same power as a conventional piston engine can be incredibly compact, sometimes small enough to compare to the size of a watermelon. And that's not marketing hype. It's simply the result of efficient engineering and physics working in Mazda's favor. But despite its advantages, the original rotary engine had serious flaws that eventually led to its downfall. First, it consumed fuel heavily. The shape of the combustion chamber prevented fuel from burning as efficiently as it should. Second, it generated a lot of heat. Components called apex seals wore out faster than expected, maintenance costs increased, and oil consumption became higher than most drivers were comfortable with. Eventually, even Mazda had to stop using the rotary engine in regular production vehicles. In 2012, the company discontinued the RX-8, marking what many enthusiasts believed was the end of the rotary era. For car lovers around the world, it felt like the death of a brilliant but impractical idea, an innovative technology that simply couldn't survive in the modern automotive market. So when Mazda announced the rotary engine was returning, reactions were split. Some people were excited and nostalgic. Others believed Mazda was wasting time and money reviving outdated technology. But both sides misunderstood what Mazda was actually building, because Mazda didn't bring back the rotary engine in its old form. They completely reinvented its purpose. Instead of asking how the rotary could compete with traditional engines, Mazda asked a different question. What if the rotary engine's greatest strengths, its compact size, smooth operation, and ability to run efficiently at a constant speed, made it ideal not for driving the wheels directly, but for generating electricity inside the vehicle? That idea changed everything. In the MX-30R EV, the rotary engine does not directly power the wheels at all. The car is still driven by an electric motor. The rotary engine works only as a generator, quietly producing electricity to recharge the battery while you drive. Take a moment to think about how significant that is. Mazda transformed the rotary into a tiny, lightweight, nearly silent onboard power station. And with that single decision, they solved one of the biggest concerns people still have about electric vehicles. This setup is called a range extender system. The beauty of it is that drivers still get the smooth and refined experience of an EV, instant torque, silent acceleration, and seamless power delivery, without constantly worrying about battery range. When the battery runs low, you don't need to search for a charging station or carefully plan routes around charging infrastructure. You simply stop at a petrol station, refill, and continue driving. And petrol stations already exist everywhere, in cities, small towns, remote highways, and rural regions across the world. That's the real problem Mazda focused on solving. Today, the biggest obstacle preventing many people from buying electric cars is no longer price. EV costs have dropped significantly. It's not even the technology itself, because modern EVs are genuinely impressive. The biggest issue is range anxiety. People fear being stranded with an empty battery while the nearest charger is too far away, occupied by multiple vehicles, or simply not working, something that happens more often than many companies like to admit. Tesla has spent billions building its supercharger network to reduce this fear. Yet charging infrastructure is still unreliable in many parts of the world. Large rural areas in America, parts of Europe, and much of developing Asia and Africa still lack dependable charging access for long-distance travel. Mazda approached the problem differently. Instead of building massive batteries or promising faster charging sometime in the future, they asked a simpler question. What if the car could manage the problem itself? What if the vehicle quietly recharged its own battery while driving using a compact engine operating efficiently in the background? What if drivers never had to think about range anxiety at all? The engineering improvements Mazda made to achieve this are more impressive than most people realize. The company introduced direct fuel injection into the new rotary engine, allowing fuel to be delivered into the combustion chamber with incredible precision. Exactly the right amount, at exactly the right moment. That means less waste, cleaner combustion, and far greater efficiency. Instead of unburned fuel escaping through the system like older rotary engines struggled with, nearly every drop of fuel is used effectively and efficiently. Mazda completely redesigned the rotary engine's thermal management system to fix one of its biggest historical weaknesses: overheating. The company introduced new cooling channels, improved airflow design, and smarter temperature monitoring systems that constantly regulate heat more effectively than before. This isn't just a minor improvement. The overheating issues that once damaged the reputation of older rotary engines have been largely solved. Mazda also upgraded the engine's internal components using diamond-like carbon coatings, a technology commonly used in aerospace engineering and high-performance motorsports. These coatings dramatically reduce friction, allowing the engine to run smoother, quieter, and more efficiently than many traditional engines on the market today. Another major breakthrough came with the redesign of the apex seals, the components that historically caused reliability concerns in rotary engines. Mazda developed new materials and updated seal geometries that significantly improve durability and lifespan. For decades, rotary engines carried a reputation for being fragile and expensive to maintain. Mazda's latest engineering changes directly target that criticism. According to Mazda's testing data, the new seals are capable of lasting as long as components found in conventional piston engines. If that performance holds true in real-world driving, it completely changes how people will view rotary ownership and long-term reliability. At the same time, the rotary engine still keeps its greatest advantage: compact size. The entire rotary generator system inside the MX-30R EV is so small that Mazda was able to preserve a spacious cabin while maintaining excellent weight distribution throughout the vehicle. And that matters because lower weight improves handling, balance, and driving feel, areas where Mazda has always focused heavily. The company's philosophy has long been that driving should feel engaging and enjoyable, not just functional. This setup allows them to keep that promise in everyday driving conditions, not just on test tracks. What makes the system even more impressive is how seamlessly it operates. Under normal driving, the electric motor handles everything. The cabin remains quiet, acceleration feels instant, and power delivery stays smooth and refined. When the battery level drops, the rotary generator quietly activates in the background. Most drivers will barely notice it. At most, there's a soft hum, quieter than road noise, wind noise, or even music playing inside the cabin. As the generator recharges the battery, the system continuously manages power flow automatically. Once enough charge is restored, the generator switches itself off again. The driver never needs to think about it. Behind the scenes, an advanced engine control unit constantly monitors dozens of variables every second, making tiny adjustments to maximize efficiency in every possible condition. Whether it's cold weather, stop-and-go city traffic, long highway journeys, or steep mountain roads. The system adapts automatically without interrupting the driving experience. What's even more interesting is that Mazda appears to have designed this technology with the future in mind. The new rotary engine can already operate using synthetic fuels, and Mazda has also created a clear pathway toward hydrogen compatibility. Synthetic fuels are receiving growing attention in Europe and Japan as a way to reduce carbon emissions without completely rebuilding transportation infrastructure. Hydrogen technology is also making a comeback as governments search for better ways to store and transport renewable energy. And this is where the rotary engine becomes especially important. Because of its compact design and ability to operate efficiently at a constant speed, the rotary engine is naturally suited for both synthetic fuel and hydrogen applications, in some ways even better than larger and more complicated piston engines. That means this technology may actually become more valuable over time instead of becoming obsolete. In an industry where nobody can accurately predict what transportation will look like 10 or 20 years from now, Mazda has built a system flexible enough to evolve alongside future energy technologies. That level of long-term thinking is remarkable for a company the size of Mazda, especially when competing against global manufacturers with research budgets many times larger. Now, this is where the conversation starts becoming uncomfortable for some of the biggest companies in the automotive industry. Tesla built its global identity around one central idea. The future is fully electric and every other solution is temporary or unnecessary. That message has been incredibly successful. It attracted massive investment, transformed Elon Musk into one of the most influential figures in the automotive world, and pushed governments to shape policies around EV adoption. But the entire vision depends on charging infrastructure expanding fast enough to support the growing number of electric vehicles on the road. And by 2025 and 2026, the cracks in that system are becoming harder to ignore. Long waiting times at charging stations during busy travel periods are now common in many regions. Power grid limitations are creating serious challenges in large cities, and utility companies are struggling to keep up with increasing demand. For many buyers, promises that charging networks will improve soon are no longer enough. People need vehicles that work reliably today, not just in a future scenario that may still be years away. BYD faces a different version of the same challenge. The company has been very successful with plug-in hybrids, especially in markets where charging infrastructure remains unreliable. Their systems are competitively priced and have helped BYD grow rapidly across global markets. But BYD's biggest strength has always been scale and affordability. BYD's strategy has always focused on scale and affordability. They succeed by producing vehicles at lower costs and manufacturing them in massive numbers. Mazda, however, is competing in a completely different way. Instead of chasing volume alone, Mazda is focusing on engineering refinement, driving enjoyment, and a premium experience that justifies a higher price point. It's a different kind of competition altogether. While BYD dominates through cost efficiency, Mazda is building value through innovation and driver experience, an area where BYD's traditional advantages matter far less. What makes Mazda's approach so important is that they identified a critical gap in the current EV market. Electric vehicles are improving rapidly, but they still haven't fully replaced conventional cars for everyone in every situation. Mazda recognized that gap and created a solution that fits directly into it. Their system doesn't rely on perfect charging infrastructure. It doesn't force drivers to completely change their habits. And it doesn't ask customers to accept inconvenience in exchange for a future that still feels years away. Drivers don't need to become early adopters, willing to tolerate limitations. They simply need a car that works well in everyday life. And that idea is starting to resonate globally. Industry analysts are beginning to notice a significant shift, especially in Europe. Governments continue pushing aggressive EV mandates, but charging infrastructure outside major cities remains inconsistent in many regions. Because of that, hybrids and range extender vehicles, technologies many companies had nearly abandoned, are making a strong comeback. Data from early 2026 shows hybrid vehicle registrations growing faster than fully electric vehicle registrations in several major European markets, including Germany, France, and the Netherlands. Mazda's range extender system is arriving at exactly the right moment for this changing consumer demand. The same trend appears in the United States, where long-distance driving is part of everyday life for millions of people. America's geography makes building a complete and reliable charging network extremely difficult, especially across rural areas and interstate highways. For many drivers, a vehicle capable of traveling 800 to 1,000 kilometers without requiring a long charging stop isn't just convenient. It completely changes the practicality of electric driving. Some automotive research firms estimate that if Mazda expands this technology into additional models beyond the MX-30R EV, the company's global market share could potentially grow from around 2% today to somewhere between 4% and 6% within the next 3 years. In the automotive world, that would be a massive shift. It would represent millions of additional vehicle sales annually and potentially pull market share away from competitors who invested heavily in fully electric strategies that are taking longer to deliver results than many expected. What may be even more important is how other manufacturers are reacting. Reports from inside the automotive industry suggest that companies such as Hyundai, certain divisions within Stellantis, and even teams inside brands publicly committed to full electrification are now speeding up development of compact and highly efficient range extender systems. Mazda has effectively forced the industry to reopen a debate many believed was already settled. Is pure battery electric technology truly the only realistic path to low-emission transportation? Or is there a smarter and more flexible solution that works better for more people in more situations? The fact that this conversation is happening again inside executive boardrooms and engineering departments says a lot about how seriously Mazda's approach is being taken. From an environmental perspective, the discussion becomes even more interesting. The argument for advanced range extender hybrids isn't only about convenience or eliminating charging anxiety. It also involves the reality of how electricity is generated in many parts of the world today. In 2026, large regions across Asia, Eastern Europe, and parts of the United States still rely heavily on coal and natural gas for electricity production. In those regions, a highly efficient range extender hybrid, one that operates mostly on electric power while using very little fuel, can sometimes produce lower total life cycle carbon emissions than a fully electric vehicle charged from a heavily fossil fuel-dependent grid. This isn't an argument against clean energy or electric vehicles. It's simply a practical discussion based on current energy infrastructure and real-world carbon calculations. Mazda's improvements in rotary engine efficiency strengthen that argument further because the company now has measurable performance data to support its claims, not just marketing promises. There's also another important factor that receives far less attention: battery manufacturing. Building large EV battery packs requires huge amounts of lithium, cobalt, nickel, and manganese. Mining and processing these materials can create significant environmental damage, and the global supply chains for them are concentrated in only a handful of countries. As demand for EVs continues rising, those supply chains are becoming increasingly vulnerable to geopolitical tensions and resource shortages. Mazda's range extender approach reduces that dependency significantly because the system uses a much smaller battery potentially only a fraction of the size required in a long-range, fully electric vehicle. It dramatically lowers the amount of critical raw materials needed for production. As governments and major corporations begin taking a closer look at the weaknesses in global EV supply chains, Mazda's range extender approach is starting to appear valuable not only from an engineering perspective, but also from a geopolitical one. And the MX-30R EV may only be the beginning of Mazda's larger plan. The company has already filed patents related to hydrogen-powered rotary combustion systems. That means the same rotary platform could eventually operate using hydrogen instead of gasoline. If hydrogen infrastructure continues developing over the next decade, and countries like Japan, Germany, South Korea, and several Middle Eastern nations are already investing heavily in that possibility, Mazda may be positioned for another major transition without redesigning the entire vehicle architecture. The concept remains the same: a compact rotary engine operating smoothly as a range extender. The difference would be the fuel itself, and if hydrogen becomes viable at scale, the result could be a powertrain with emissions reduced essentially to water vapor. That represents a completely different route toward low-emission transportation than the fully battery-electric path that has dominated industry conversations for years. At its core, Mazda's story is about what happens when a company refuses to follow the crowd, even when that crowd is massive, well-funded, and completely convinced it already knows the future. While much of the automotive industry declared the internal combustion engine finished and positioned themselves as visionaries for moving beyond it, Mazda's engineers approached the problem from another angle. Instead of asking how to eliminate the engine entirely, they asked something far more interesting. What if the engine itself was never the real problem? What if the issue was simply the way it had been used? That question led Mazda to an idea that now seems surprisingly logical in hindsight: using the rotary engine not as the main source of propulsion, but as a compact, self-charging generator working alongside electric power. It's the kind of breakthrough that feels obvious only after someone finally thinks of it. Yet almost nobody pursued it seriously because the entire industry was moving in the same direction without stopping to consider alternative paths. And that's what makes Mazda's approach different. This is not a nostalgia project built to attract headlines. It's not a temporary marketing experiment before returning to conventional designs. It is a carefully engineered and strategically consistent vision for how transportation could transition toward cleaner mobility in a more practical and flexible way. A system that doesn't depend on perfect charging infrastructure. A system that works for people living far away from reliable charging stations. A system that doesn't force consumers in developing economies to choose between environmental responsibility and everyday practicality. Most importantly, it's a solution designed for the world as it exists today, while still remaining adaptable for the world of tomorrow. But the biggest disruption here may not even be the technology itself. The real disruption is the mindset behind it. Mazda looked at the same challenge every major automaker was trying to solve and arrived at a completely different answer, one that many competitors never considered because they had already convinced themselves there was only one possible solution. In today's automotive industry, true surprises are rare. Most new announcements are simply updated versions of strategies introduced years earlier. Finding a genuinely original solution to a well-known problem is incredibly uncommon. Whether Mazda's rotary range extender system eventually becomes a dominant technology for the next 2 decades or simply acts as a critical bridge during a long transition period, one thing is already clear. Mazda has changed the conversation. They've given millions of drivers a reason to rethink what the future of mobility could look like, and they've forced every other automaker to return to their engineering departments and ask an uncomfortable question. Have we really explored every possible solution? If this story changed the way you think about the future of the car industry, share it with someone else who should hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Street Horsepower and turn on notifications, because the next story we're covering is even more overlooked than this one, and it could have an even bigger impact on the future.